Excited to be here. Shane O'Flaherty. I'm the Global Director of Travel and Transportation for Microsoft. And we focus a lot on a variety of industries across the board. And Microsoft is more of a platform company. So what I'm going to talk about today is really the engines of technology that are unlocking a lot of innovation in the travel space. So I cover the hotel, airline, cruise, travel agency, GDS marketplace, and then rail and passenger rail. So I cover a variety of areas that we're going to talk a little bit about the technologies, not only in travel, but then also talk about technologies in different verticals that I think you can bring over into the travel space to unlock innovation. When you think of Microsoft, historically, you don't really think of Microsoft as a travel company, but I think we're more of a platform company, and we help enterprises empower them with technology to do more. But we're also kind of kindred souls in the B2C marketplace. So we own Xbox, LinkedIn, Skype. We do about $2 billion through our retail stores. And then Bing from a search perspective. We do about $10 billion in consumer product goods sales. So we take all our learnings and all our technology from our forward-facing consumer businesses, and then we try to translate that and provide that to enterprise customers to do more. When you think of even our call centers, our customer care intelligence centers, we do about 70 million interactions on an annualized basis. And we're embedding AI, and we'll talk a little bit about AI. We embed AI into everything that we do. So that idea of when someone who calls or who's talking online to basically a digital agent like a chat bot, the idea behind that is if the chat bot can't answer that question, it's going to pass that question over to a consumer service rep. And as the consumer is talking to the customer service rep, the chat bot is actually looking in, listening to the conversation, what we call deep learning. So the next time that question comes up again, the bot will be able to answer the question with the individual. So again, we're always focused on driving technology, helping empower organizations to do more. And our learnings across all industries with technology can be a scary thing, but at the same time, it really is focused on driving innovation across the board. What we've seen great success in companies that are, first of all, culturally transforming themselves. They're helping their employees, individuals, as part of their organizations to really take small leaps around innovation, allow them to fail fast, and then ultimately to dream big. And the idea around technology is really how do you use that to empower not only your employees, but also empower the technology that's forward-facing with the consumer as a whole. And at the cornerstone of everything, it's around your data estate. We have a treasure trove of data. All the companies in this room have a treasure trove of data. So how do you use that data in a way that is empowering your employees and at the same time also driving a better customer experience? So at Microsoft, we focus on kind of 4 key areas when we talk about digital transformation and artificial intelligence. The first one is around the customer experience. So when we talk about Microsoft, it's our first-party products and services, but then an ecosystem of partners that we've curated across the globe in various industries, whether it's retail, manufacturing, healthcare, or travel. So the idea is how do we embed technologies in these solutions to drive a better customer experience? The second pillar is really around empowering your employees, and I think that's a critical area focused on where we sometimes forget is, the consumer is at the cutting edge of this digital age, but sometimes we forget about the idea of empowering our employees with technology to allow them to have superpowers so they have more information at their fingertips than the consumer who is coming up to them. Optimize your operation. So focused on your operation as a whole, how do you move from this reactive world we kind of live in to more of a proactive world? And understand before something is supposed to, let's say it's the door battery on a hotel room, or it's a faulty part on part of an engine. How do we use sensors to understand that this is going to fail in the next 30, 60, 90 days? Get ahead of the curve, fix it, so the consumer doesn't have to encounter that. So all of these technologies are here today, and how do you utilize them in your business to drive change? And then transforming your product, and I'll talk a little about some new technologies as well that really are at the forefront that are helping companies transform what their business is like today, how do they turn that into a next generation digital business? But when you look at the pillars as a whole, again, it's all about the data. So what we're seeing a lot of companies, specifically, I'd say even in the airline space today, globally, is they're taking all their data and they're moving it to the cloud. So they're moving their data out of their customer service or customer data storage. They're moving their operations data. They're moving all their data into one common data estate, common data scheme, and that allows them to ask questions that they were never able to ask before. and determine and get insights about things that they never knew. So we've seen companies take their information and all of a sudden flip their sales model and their sales people out in the field upside down, because they're moving from more of a subjective decision process to a digital decision process, is using the data to drive decisions. And it's not only, and then the human intelligence is added to that, which is a little bit more of your gut call, but they're using data to drive more decisions on a global basis. So as you think of your business, whether it's in the travel agency world, the meeting world, in the hotel world, the airline world, think about your data and your data estate and how you're going to harness that to drive next generation decisions. But the uniqueness about where we are today is this is kind of an interesting kind of convergence. You have the cloud, so you have the cloud that can store data very cheaply today. Then you have this massive data. We generated more data in the last 2 years than we've done in a lifetime, and probably next year will be even more data in a lifetime. So the amount of data generated everywhere, then layering in with AI. So when you think of AI, it's artificial intelligence, kind of the umbrella. And then you have machine learning. As the machines learn more and more and more about the data, they get smarter and smarter. And then you look at AI innovations around what's called cognitive services. So it's vision APIs, there's speech, and then there's reading. So when you think of vision APIs, the machines now have reached human parity. When you think of speech, the machines now have reached human parity. When you think of reading, the machines now have reached human parity. So the machines can do things that we can do, and I'll talk a little bit about how do we utilize them in your business as a whole. So when you bring to the consumer side, how does cognitive services play? And I think we talked about Amara as an example. The minister talked about Amara being facial recognition. So how is facial recognition used? We see it biometrics at the airport. We are now starting to see it in hotels. We're seeing it in restaurants where you can walk in. It recognizes who you are, and it says, would you like your order, what you ordered last time you're here. So how do you use vision as a way around facial recognition and even product recognition? So from a maintenance side of it, as the cameras are looking, it sees something that's odd, that's different. It will say, hey, there's something wrong over here. It will send a note to the employee and say, can you go take a look at it? So using technology to help individuals drive a more productive workforce. From a speech perspective, I think you'll see in the future as, at Microsoft, part of our meeting room of the future, when you walk in, as an example, it will recognize who's sitting around the table. And then as you're talking, the computer, basically the agent, is translating everything that you're talking about, and then also talking about action items. So if I say, hey, John, can you do this tomorrow? Then it's taking a notation on that and sending John a note from his email box, say, action item for John. So you're driving multiple efficiencies in the meeting room space. And at Microsoft, one thing they're testing as an example is if I'm the meeting room leader and the meeting room's taking place, and then I get a report at the end that said who was paying attention and who was not. And the idea behind that is not really to call people out, but you're trying to drive productivity in the leadership of an organization. And if people aren't paying attention, there's a reason, and it usually falls on the overall manager. So all these customer engagement, employee empowerment is using technology to drive more efficiency. So you see chatbots, you're starting to see chatbots basically all over the world, even our customer care centers, on your mobile phones. And now we're seeing chatbots on the employee side as well. So using that technology that if I'm an employee, I can just ask the system, hey, how much vacation time do I have left? What is the policy on this? What is the policy on that? And the chatbot is answering these questions for the individual. And then if the chatbot can't answer that question, then it's passing over to HR. So chatbots can be used both from a consumer-facing technology and then from an employee-facing technology. So overall, using cognitive service around vision, speech, all these different areas we're seeing driving innovation across the board. And when you look at travel and transport, this is an interesting stat. When you think of AI, McKinsey reported that the number one global industry that will be influenced by AI is travel. And the reason why is the amount of information. There's movement everywhere. And you're gathering that information and pulling that information out and using AI and machine learning to drive better decision-making processes and operational efficiency. So when you talk about embracing AI, this is the number one industry that should embrace AI moving forward to drive change in your organization. And then when we talk about the consumer, this is a quote from Arne Sorensen, who's the president and CEO of Marriott. We're in an absolute war for who owns the consumer. And when we talk about this, we talk about the variety of different systems in place. So who owns the consumer, which is ultimately who owns the data at the end of the day, will drive that better experience. So in the past, the hotels, the airlines have ceded control for some of their data off to the GDS companies and the OTAs. And ironically, when you think back in time, the airlines used to own some of the GDS companies, like Sabre was owned by American, United owned what is now Travelport. But that idea of who owns the data is who's going to win in the end, and that's all the consumer data. So how do you drive a more personalized experience for your consumer, and how do you free the data as a whole? When you think of a hotel stay, one of the big challenges is the data silos out there. You have disparate systems, you have a lot of legacy systems in the marketplace, but you can't free the data, and that's the number one thing we get from our clients globally is, can you help me free the data? So if you think of an example of at a hotel, see the next slide here, I'll go back. So if you think at a hotel itself, they market to you before you come on property, you arrive on property and you stay, they don't market to you at all during that journey, and then they say, how was your stay in the past? And the reason being is they can't free the data in real time when you're on property. So if they provided me inside information while I'm on property, they actually could drive a better customer experience for me. But what we're seeing is moving from I'd call it like get it right, which is more of an operational focus philosophy we're seeing in the travel space, into more of a get me right. And that's really what we're seeing as the movement towards putting the customer at the center of the journey and then changing your operations and your design operations on the back end to accommodate of what will make this journey best for the consumer. And the consumer is driven significantly by technology as a whole. And as you look forward, by 2020, 85% of all customer interactions will be with more of a bot, and the other side of the coin will be more of a human. So we're at a very interesting tipping point in society where in the past humans we had to adapt to technology, and now it's kind of flipping where technology is adapting to humans. So we're at a very interesting tipping point in society as a whole. But the idea for a consumer today is I want you to automate and industrialize all these routine transactions of life for me using, let's say, a chat bot. And then when I want to have a moment where I want to interact with an individual or employee, I will. And then when I do that, I want you to ultimately wow me. So any type of what you consider mundane tasks for a consumer today as part of your operations could be accomplished by some type of bot. Whether it's a hotel booking, an airline booking, an itinerary, bringing it together. All of these stuff can be answered today by a bot. And then when the consumer wants to talk to someone, they will pick up the phone or the bot will pass them over. So very much focus on using the technology that exists today to drive a better consumer experience. In our call centers, as an example, as we integrated AI into it, our customer sat rates went significantly up higher. And then the time the customer spent was significantly lower. So and the reason being is we were able to provide answers to the individual questions. So as we look at the traveler journey, I think this is fascinating in the hotel space. It's similar in the airline space, is the idea that this data at the bottom here, we have it all as a company, but we're not freeing the data and essentially looking at the data to drive a better customer experience. And so as you look at different industries as a whole, as we look at retail as an example, as an industry that's farther ahead than travel. But then if you look at an industry that does I'd call it hyper-personalization at global scale, is really the gaming industry. There's 2 billion gamers globally. But that idea that as someone is gaming, they're looking at how the individual is playing, and then they're presenting them with content and offers in real time to drive a better gaming experience. So if you think of different verticals and you think of gaming as an example, what if you brought the gaming principles and technology and then you brought that into the travel space? So you're watching what a consumer is doing in real time during their journey, and you can present them with offers and content. And I think today travel companies really make a lot of decisions based on imperfect data and limited data. And then if we were able to harness all this data together, what ultimately could that drive? So the engines of our future, we talked a little bit about AI. These are the engines that are going to drive innovation moving forward. The Internet of Things, mixed reality, which is really more of you have virtual reality, then you have augmented reality, which is you tap your phone on, some information comes up, and then you have mixed reality, which is HoloLens. So it's your real world blended with holograms. So we're seeing a lot of movement in this area around digital twins. So in a meeting space, as an example, you don't have to go to a meeting to go on a FAM trip to look at meeting space. You can see it digitally, and then you can change what the meeting room looks like based on your interests and your design, and see that globally, and that idea behind just even shortening the sales process. So in closing, there will be more change in the next 10 years than the last 250, probably in the last couple of years. So if you think there's technology advancements are coming quickly, they're coming very rapidly. When you look at quantum computing and where it's going, what may take 100 years for a computer to solve today, in a few years that will take a few hours. Okay, so as you're looking at all your data and your data streams, imagine utilizing that data in near real time to ultimately drive a better operational experience and a better customer experience. And this is a tipping point. So we encourage everyone, all business owners from all the different industries, to embrace and take advantage of technology, because it can drive digital transformation. And in the old world, it used to be big eats small. The big companies ate the small companies. And now what we're seeing is fast eats big. And that's part of this digital transformation that's taking place. Thank you for your time.